11 witnesses with identical stories of being under attack by small, goblin-like creatures. But 70 years later, science still can't explain what terrorized that Kentucky farmhouse. They're bulletproof, they glow in the dark, and they keep coming back. I'm Carol Ann. Welcome to the In-Between. The night of August 21st, 1955 was a warm one in southwest Kentucky. After a day in the mid-90s, the temperature was cooling around 7 p.m., but not fast enough, especially if you're sitting in an old 2-room farmhouse with 11 other people. Maybe that's why Billy Ray Taylor volunteered to go outside to get some water from the well. The farm belonged to 50-year-old Glennie Langford and was located between Hopkinsville and Kelly, Kentucky. Glennie, widow, has been married twice with children from both marriages, at least 2 grown boys from the first and 3 younger children from the second. Not going to throw 11 names at you, but just know that night, Glennie's sons, Lucky and JC, and their wives, JC's brother-in-law, and Billy Ray and June Taylor are all there visiting Glennie and her 3 younger children for dinner. That makes 11 people in 2 rooms with a small loft on the second floor. So it's no wonder that even if they're having an awesome time together, that Billy Ray might jump at the chance to spend a few minutes outside where the temperatures are starting to fall. Glennie's getting dinner ready and needs some water from the well about 100 yards from the house. Billy Ray volunteers, grabs the bucket, and heads outside. As he's drawing the full bucket up, his attention is drawn to the sky, where he sees an egg-shaped wash tub all lit up like a streak of fire, with an exhaust trail that was every color of the rainbow fly overhead from south to north over the farm, stop and hover for a moment, and then go down at what he guessed was the northern edge of the farm's property. The idea of UFOs is pretty common in the 50s, so Billy Ray runs back to the house and tells everyone what he saw, a genuine UFO. No one believes him, not even his wife. So Billy Ray says fine and heads out to the porch where he's joined by his friend, Glennie's oldest son, Lucky. The 2 men are on the porch for about 45 minutes when the dog starts going nuts and trying to hide itself under the house. They look out in the direction that Billy Ray said the flying saucer had gone down, and in the trees, they can see a faint glow. Not like from a flashlight or a lantern, but, quote, brighter than the dark around it. It moves up and down between ground level and about 5 feet off the ground. And as it gets closer, they can see that the glowing light is actually a short, glowing humanoid figure somewhere between 2.5 and 4 feet tall, depending on the witness, with a large, round, bald head. It had large, yellow, glowing eyes, spaced really far apart, but they seemed to be small in comparison to the size of the head. It had big, floppy ears, a cone-shaped nose that ended in a ball, no neck, and arms so long they almost reached the ground, with fingers tipped with talon-like claws. It should be noted that some of the descriptions vary a bit, with some saying no nose and some saying it had antennae, but also with the caveat that the eyes were so distracting that some details may be off. It had a strong upper body with legs that looked stiff, and it walked awkwardly like it was wading through water. One witness says its feet looked like suction cups, but nobody else saw them to be able to say for sure. It's wearing some kind of silver suit, maybe even made of metal, that shines in the moonlight. Glennie actually describes it as looking like a 5-gallon gasoline can with the head on top and small legs. It was shimmering bright metal like on my refrigerator. When shown a drawing of the creature based on Billy Ray's description, Glennie said she didn't even want to look at it because it was just so close to what she saw. Some of the men disagree a bit, so other sketches have been made to account for the various descriptions. As the creature gets closer, it raises its arms as if in surrender, while making both chirping sounds and these guttural hissing sounds without ever moving its lipless mouth. Lucky and Billy Ray say, nope, and run inside the house, Lucky grabbing a shotgun and Billy Ray a .22 rifle, yelling that there is some kind of being out there. Everyone just thinks Lucky and Billy Ray are joking around. In fact, when Lucky grabs the guns, Glennie scolds him, like only a mama can, that his joking has gone too far. But then one of the women inside sees it, and there's no longer any doubt that this is no joke. Glennie sends the 3 children to the bedroom. Moments later, she screams at what she describes as a merciless face peeking through an open window. Lucky fires at it through the screen, and based on the loud clank sound, like a bullet hitting a metal bucket, I'd say he hit it. But the entity somersaults backward, totally fine, and runs off with a rattling bag of pennies noise, floating rather than fully touching the ground, using its arms to move. Lucky and Billy Ray take up positions guarding the porch. Half an hour passes before a clawed hand grabs at Billy Ray's hair from the roof overhang. His wife pulls him inside, but the men go back out and fire again, knocking the creature off the roof, and watch as it floats down, jingles metallically, and floats away. They see another one in a tree. They shoot it out of the tree, but it floats to earth and floats away like the others. Another one comes from around the corner of the house with its hands raised like the first one, only to be shot point blank, which, just like the others, sends it rolling backwards, but doesn't seem to hurt it. By now, the men notice that the glow that these things all have going on intensifies when it gets hit, or even if they just shout at it. Interesting. Is it me? Or does that sound like every force field in every sci-fi movie ever? Best guesses are that there are somewhere between 2 and 5 creatures running around the house, avoiding porch lights, seemingly not so much to stay hidden, but due to an actual aversion to the light. They peek in the windows, tap on the glass, run around on the roof, but never make any noise other than those chirps and deep hisses. The 3 children, the first ones to call them Goblins, scream at glowing eyes and ears looking in their bedroom window. A living room window pane shatters for no discernible reason. So Lucky opens all the windows to avoid flying glass coming in, assuming that these things are now trying to enter the house. But they never try to get in. For the next 2 hours, Lucky and Billy Ray manage to at least keep these things at bay, emptying entire boxes of ammo. But after 11 p.m. or so, things start to die down. Glennie, the calmest one in the room, says, "Now's our chance. Let's get out of here." The group makes a run for it, pile into their cars, and take off for the Hopkinsville police station. All 11 people pour into the station, their fear palpable to the officers behind the desk, and start flooding them with their story of terror at the mercy of these goblin-like creatures. The officers can tell that they're all genuinely freaked. Billy Ray's pulse is recorded at 140 beats per minute, twice the average heart rate, with no signs of intoxication from any of them. Chief Russell Greenwell would later say, "These are not the kind of people who normally ran to the police. Something frightened them, something beyond their comprehension." The police take their story seriously, and after having all of their statements taken, 16 officers escort the family back to their home, where they are then joined by 4 military police officers from nearby Fort Campbell, who reportedly take pictures. Funny thing is, no one knows how the military found out about it, and none of the photos they took have ever surfaced. They find spent shells, bullet holes, and a luminous patch on grass near the woods, which only glows if you're looking at it from the right angle. What they don't find is any signs of intruders or any kind of landing site. But then again, Everybody was so freaked out to really look for it that night, but they didn't find anything the next morning either. In fact, even the police were so freaked out when they're out checking out the yard that when one officer accidentally steps on a cat's tail, making the cat wail, everybody pulls their guns. But other than the damage to the house created by Lucky and Billy Ray, no one can find anything. So, somewhere around midnight, 1 a.m., the police leave and the family settles in to try to get some sleep. But around 3:30 a.m., Glennie wakes up to see one peeking through her window, claws on the screen, hissing. Lucky and Billy Ray take a few more shots and manage to keep them all at bay until dawn. Once that sun comes up, the whole family can't leave fast enough. A few of them come back every now and then for a few weeks to settle affairs, but no one in Glennie's family ever lives there again. Unfortunately for everyone, the cat is already out of the bag. The word gets out about the incident and the newspapers take it from there. Hordes of people show up and make themselves at home, hoping to get a glimpse of the little green men that they read about in the newspaper. Fun fact, even though not one of the 10 witnesses, and it's only 10 because one of the women admitted to being so scared she closed her eyes and never saw anything, not one of them ever described the creatures as being green. But that's what the paper printed. And it's because of this case, with the papers calling them green, that we have the phrase little green men today. The crowds got so out of control, some people thought it was perfectly okay to just walk right in the house uninvited. To try to deter the gathering crowds, the family briefly charges admission, but stops as soon as people start accusing them of hoaxing the whole thing and just doing all of it for the money. But if that was their motivation, they do a pretty crappy job. They never cashed in on any movie or book deals. The only actual insider account is called Alien Legacy, written in 2007 by Geraldine Sutton Stith, Lucky's daughter, who gets the scoop from her dad many years later.
Your daddy ever talk about it?
Not very often. You were very, very, very lucky if you got him to talk. And me, I didn't want to hear it. It scared me.
And there are, of course, many people who have offered explanations over the years, and understandably so. This encounter is nuts. Air Force Major John E. Albert suggested escaped circus monkeys painted silver, though there is no record anywhere of circuses painting their monkeys. Joe Nickel, a prominent paranormal investigator and skeptic, proposed great horned owls as the culprit. For an owl, they're pretty big, with ears, glowing eyes, and they're territorial in late August, making them a little more aggressive than usual. 2 of the police officers reported seeing shooting stars while they were on their way to check out the Langford farm that night. So Billy Ray could have just seen a spectacular meteor falling, and his imagination grabbed it and ran with it. Foxfire is a bioluminescent fungus that's not exactly common in Kentucky, but it's certainly not rare. Maybe that's where the glowing spot in the grass came from. And many people have brought up the fact that Billy Ray worked the carnival circuit, suggesting that he'd learned a thing or two from his time on the crew and wanted to cash in on his new hoaxing skills. And while I'm certainly not going to deny that some of these explanations could be valid, some of them still have some pretty serious problems. The fact that all 7 adults gave matching statements. That's pretty hard to do. Ufologist Isabel Davis from the Center for UFO Studies put out a 200-plus page report on the incident around 1956-1957. She interviewed all the witnesses and talked about their reliability, especially Glennie's. She points out that the drawings made by the children matched those made by the adults. But let's cut to the chase. The leading theory for the skeptics is the great horned owl. But owls don't take a shotgun blast at point-blank range and just fly away. Neither do silver monkeys, for that matter. I certainly don't claim to know what these things were, but I know they weren't owls or monkeys. But we can speculate all we want because we're never going to know for sure. They never came back. Or did they? The Hopkinsville Goblins may be one of the most well-known encounters of goblin-like creatures, but it's far from the only one. They're not even the only ones in Kentucky. Enter Greg Newkirk, a paranormal investigator, co-founder of the Week in Weird website, and formerly of the slightly less than professional Ghost Hunters Incorporated. The only reason I say less than professional is because when Greg was still a member, the group was made up of himself and some of his high school friends. They were just a bunch of kids who seriously loved the paranormal. But time moves on and the group kind of fades away. Except Greg still goes back occasionally to check the site's email box, which is still active when this story takes place in 2012. It's April 22nd. Greg checks the box, and much to his surprise, there's an email there. It's from a man who says his name is Dr. David Christie, and that he and his family moved to the tiny, like less than 200 people tiny, town of Hellier in Pike County, Kentucky, only a few months earlier, seeking the peace and quiet promised with country living. But now David has a problem, and he needs some help. Every night, he and his family are being harassed by small, pale creatures that he believes are extraterrestrials coming from an old mine on his property. He wants help to seal the cave entrance. Greg is intrigued but skeptical. So he replies telling this guy, "Hey, I'm a ghost hunting guy. I have zero experience with aliens or explosives. I'll try to help, but you're going to have to give me a little bit more information about what's going on here." David responds right away, explaining he got Greg's name from a friend of a friend named terrorized, and goes on to explain the ordeal that he and his family is going through. The Christie family had only moved to the area about 7 months prior, and the first couple of months were just fine. It's around December that the problems start. It starts with strange tracks in the snow. Human-like, but without the heel part, which David just chalks up to either a lone animal or some local kids hazing the new people in town. His dog barks herself hoarse if left outside after dark. Shed doors open on their own. His kids' toys vanish. Stuff in their yard is moved all over the place. They call the police, but that goes about as far as you can imagine. In January, with the whole family sitting around at the table eating breakfast, David's 5-year-old daughter starts talking about watching the kids without hair playing in the yard the night before. His wife says, "Can you describe these kids without hair?" To which their daughter replies, "They were bald like Grandpa and weren't wearing any clothes." That very same day, David finds a wreath that's usually hanging inside the back porch stuffed in the mailbox. By the next day, he had motion floodlights installed on the house, and the kids without hair stopped coming around. Things are quiet for a few weeks until the end of February. David wakes up to his daughter screaming and running out of her room. The kids without hair are back. She tells David that they're trying to look in her window, but they're too short, so they just started tapping on the glass. She never sleeps in that room again. David says, "That's enough," and calls the police for a second time. Police send a trooper who spots disturbed ground under the daughter's window, but says it's just animals. Better call the game commission. Every day for a week after that, David sees signs of activity in his yard. Smudges on the windows, sidewalk stones moved to the other side of the yard, torn screens. On March 7th, around 1:30 a.m., the dog wakes up David to go outside. As David groggily pads to the back door, he sees the floodlights are on. He takes a cautious peek out the window to see shadows dancing on the lawn, 2 figures making guttural chirping noises like skunk, and then he sees something else. A pale, hairless humanoid, about 4 feet tall, standing in the flower bed. It has sickly pale skin, large, round, bird-like eyes, no nose, and just a tiny slit for a mouth. It hops out to join its friends, at least 5 of them, and they all scramble off into the woods. Not long after that, the dog vanishes. And while out walking to look for the dog, David finds a bunch of his kids' toys lying around in front of the opening to an old abandoned mine shaft entrance near the edge of his property, which is why he thinks that that's where they're coming from every night. After a couple of months with no more word from David, Greg starts to wonder if he's in the wind, but another email comes in. It's David apologizing for the lack of communication, but explaining that things were getting so bad at the house that he and his family decided to leave. So he's had his hands full for a little while. However, he and his brother-in-law went back to the house for a couple of days to pack up some things. When they get there, there are little 3-toed tracks everywhere leading down to the stream next to the mine entrance. But that night, the creatures came back. This time, David gets what Greg has been asking for: pictures. Attached to the email are images of 3-toed footprints in the mud that are so clear and perfect that you can actually see dermal ridges and creases in the skin from the bottom of the foot. In another image, you can see where the mud stuck to the foot and lifted out of the print. But there's something else. An image that, according to David, is the creature itself peeking out from behind a tree. The image was taken at night from a distance, so, of course, it's pretty grainy. At first glance, it looks just like some light splotches in the dark. But David also sent a second version of that image with the outline of the creature drawn on it to help you make sense of what you're seeing. I gotta say, it's pretty intriguing. Greg shows the prints to animal print experts who tell him, I have no idea. Greg is kind of excited at the thought of investigating this craziness and starts making plans in his head for a trip down there from where he lives in Cincinnati, but he never hears from David again. Fast forward a couple of years, and despite not hearing back from David for years at this point, Greg never stopped thinking about it, so he and his wife Dana head down there with 3 other paranormal investigators to try to get to the bottom of everything in documentary style. Long story short, they can't find the house. They can't find any record of David Christie owning land in Pike County, and they can't find a single soul that's even ever heard of him. Only then do they learn that they can track David's emails by his email IP address. Everyone's heart stops when the IP on the email comes up as originating from Ajax, Ontario, not Hellier, Kentucky. Imagine all 5 of them sitting in an Airbnb in Kentucky for a hoax. However, the friend that was helping them with the trace also let them know that for people concerned with anonymity, such as Dr. Christie, he was most likely using a VPN, which means the IP trace means exactly squat. On a more positive note, as they're chatting with any local resident they could find and showing them the pictures of the tracks, one resident made a comment that the mud that the track was in looks like slurry. Slurry is a mixture of water and fine coal particles, a byproduct of the mining process. It's kind of a toxic mess. That mixture is sometimes injected back into old mines for storage, but if that mine collapses or something, the slurry can sometimes find its way back to the surface and spill out. Hellier is an old coal mining town with just as many old mines as old caves. So the fact that someone who has seen slurry his whole life can identify the substance in which the print was made as being slurry certainly goes a long way toward placing that footprint in the Hellier area. Now, I have seen the first season of their what turned out to be a documentary series called Hellier that you can see either on Prime Video or YouTube. The documentary goes way deeper than just looking for either David Christie or the goblins attacking him. This thing spreads out farther than the Kentucky cave system itself. And if you've ever been to Mammoth Cave, you know that's saying something. By the time everything is said and done, Greg and his team uncover some majorly crazy connections to John Keel, the writer of the Mothman prophecies, Indrid Cold, and alien assassins. So if you need a new rabbit hole to go down, I highly recommend it. However, it's way too wide for me to tackle right now. So, suffice to say, they have not, to this day, heard from David Christie again. Is it all a hoax? Maybe. But those pictures are pretty compelling. But the fact that this guy was all in and then totally ghosted Greg was a bit suspicious. But then again, now that he had moved away, maybe he just wanted to forget the entire nightmare. And here's another one of those crazy theories right out of my own head. Okay, not out of my head, because I know a lot of you are thinking the same thing. We need to take a serious look at the cave system. Kentucky is riddled with them. Hopkinsville is in a decent area as far as number of caves. So what if these things are just migrating back and forth from cave to cave? The Hellier area doesn't have a ton of caves, but it does have a ton of coal mines. What's the difference to a goblin needing a place to hide? Now, don't think for a second that these two incidents, 60 years apart, are the only encounters people have had with goblins, both inside Kentucky and outside, including the one country to avoid if you want to steer clear of goblins. Take, for example, the curious story of Donald Patton. Donald was 14 years old that summer of 1990, somewhere in Kentucky, and his hobby each night was to go outside after dinner as the air is cooling down to throw rocks in a pond on their land. Interesting hobby, but then again, he's a 14-year-old boy, so not really all that strange. So this night, he's out by the pond and it's starting to get dark, and he hears his dad come out the door, knowing his dad is going to tell him to come inside. Sure enough, he hears his dad yell, "Donald, Eric, come on in. It's getting dark and I want to go to bed." Donald stalls, not ready to go in yet. His dad, walking a little closer, yells again, "Donald, Eric, you boys get in here now." Eric is Donald's 9-year-old nephew. Just so you know, Eric's best friend is Matt. Donald stands up and yells back, "Eric's not here. He's in his room. It's just me." Donald's dad keeps walking closer and asks him, "Well, who are the people you were talking to?" "What people?" In that moment, a look of fear crosses his dad's face as he asks Donald one more time, "Are you sure Eric and Matt aren't out here with you?" "No, Matt's not even here tonight." Donald's dad tells him that he saw someone standing behind him, but Donald hadn't seen anyone. His dad starts searching the property, finds nothing. They go in the house, count heads, and sure enough, everyone else is inside. Donald's brother even takes a crack at searching the yard. Nothing. That look of fright stays on his dad's face the rest of the night, and he's pretty quiet. The next morning, he tells everyone the whole story. He says he saw two little people, about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, dressed in white, standing right behind Donald. He didn't see Donald sitting on the ground. He thought it was just Donald and Eric. When he shouted for the boys to come inside, the little people ran around the pond and disappeared behind an outbuilding. It's important to note, by the way that Donald's yard is laid out and fenced off, it would be impossible for anyone to run around that pond and behind that outbuilding without Donald seeing them. But he didn't. Donald's dad is so freaked, he doesn't leave the house at night without being armed for months. But the fear really doesn't hit Donald until his dad tells him that these people were right behind him, close enough to stare right down his shirt collar. Now, Donald wonders where he would be if his dad hadn't come out to get him, or how many other nights they may have been standing right behind him, staring down his shirt collar. Now, not all encounters are this dramatic, but doesn't make them any less chilling. Take the encounter of Reddit user FrankieGLZ66. In the late 90s, Frankie shared a 2-bedroom apartment with a couple. He doesn't name the couple, but for clarity's sake, let's just call them Danny and Sandy. One night, Frankie and Danny are on the couch watching TV. And in this apartment, when you're watching the TV, you can see down the hall, you can see the 2-bedroom doors and the bathroom door in front of you. So as the two guys are sitting on the couch, Sandy comes out of their room, tells the guys, hey, I'm going to take a shower, and goes in the bathroom and closes the door. As soon as the bathroom door shuts, this weird, skinny, thin-skinned, albino-looking creature, roughly 3.5 foot tall, comes out of Danny and Sandy's room and starts creeping toward the bathroom. It stops, looks around, sees Frankie and Danny looking right at it, busted, turns right back around and disappears back into the bedroom. Danny and Frankie look at each other and fly off the couch into the bedroom after it. They open the door and there's nothing there. They search the entire apartment. Nothing. It's just gone. But as freaky as all those encounters are, they all kind of pale in comparison to the hijinks and happenings in Zimbabwe. Now, to be fair, the goblins of Zimbabwe seem to be manifesting themselves a little differently than the ones we have talked about so far. Truth be told, I read a headline about things happening in Zimbabwe that was dated just last year. So I thought it would be a great addition to this episode. So I just kind of parked it in my brain until I was ready to add it to the script. But then I went to take another look at the information and was a little astounded at what I was seeing. I quickly figured out that in Zimbabwe, they see goblins more like we in the West see demons, as spiritual entities that can be conjured up using witchcraft and are well known to cause torment and destruction wherever they are encountered. These goblins ain't playing. Multiple recent stories have been published of these creatures being responsible for everything from the destruction of crops to the killing of cattle to murder. In 2021, a clinic in Umzingwane was temporarily shut down due to its staff being repeatedly assaulted. In Bulawayo, a family with 3 children claims it has been terrorized by a goblin that attacks the children with horrifying tactics like shaving their heads while they sleep and even stabbing one of the children in the leg. In 2019, goblins were blamed for the deaths of 10 members of one family. In that particular case, after the family had mysteriously lost its 10th member, the family left their house and camped out on the doorstep asking for the help of their local Madzibaba, which is like their local spiritual leader. The Madzibaba went to the family's home to investigate and found a goblin statue, a lance, a knob carry, which is like a wooden club that had a hyena tail tied to it, and a clay pot with blood in it and a piece of paper with the names of family members written on it. And if 2019 isn't recent enough, headlines were made just last year about a new police station in Bulilima that is now abandoned because the police officers staying there had been continually harassed with personal assaults, doors opening and closing on their own, and things crawling on the roof. Now, I realize that these Zimbabwe goblins are a little different than the ones we talked about in Kentucky, but if my research for this episode has taught me anything, it's that everyone's definition of a goblin is different. From the little white people to green, scaly, miniature ogre-looking things to tiny 10-inch beings crawling on the bedroom wall. Who's to say which definition is correct? The only thing I know for sure is that something is out there lurking in the shadows, trying really hard not to be seen. And if you do see one, well, for your sake, I hope they don't see you. Between you and me, that whole encounter around a Hellier just totally creeps me out. I think it's just the unbelievably brazen behavior. I would have noped my way out of that house long before they did. I do recommend the documentary series Hellier if you want to go deeper on this one. And trust me, it goes deep. I would not be surprised if you hear more about that insanity on this channel in the future. But until then, if I've left you in the mood for even more stories of white, gangly humanoid creatures lurking around your yard, click right here. Be careful out there, and I will see you here again on the In-Between.